My name is Ella. I've been married to my husband, Jake, for 3 years. Before getting married, we lived together, just the two of us. But after our wedding, we started living with my father-in-law. The reason is, it's closer to my husband's workplace. I continued working even after getting married, but due to a certain event, I quit my job. That was to take care of my father-in-law. About 1.5 years ago, my father-in-law began to show symptoms of dementia. His condition worsened, and he was recognized to require care based on the assessment for nursing care. Initially, we thought of a nursing facility, but due to my husband's wish, I ended up providing care at home.
Please, on my days off, I promise to help taking care of him. I don't want to put my dad in a facility.
I understand, but remember, I've only been here for 2 years. Your father probably doesn't want to be nursed by me that much. So please, help as much as you can. It was the first time I saw my husband desperately asking for something, and because he promised to help, I believed him. Once I started taking care of my father-in-law, I realized some things about our home: the steps, the toilet, and the bath. At first, my father-in-law could walk around the house, but he would trip on steps and fall in the toilet because he couldn't support himself. After discussing this with my husband, we decided to renovate the house. Of course, we still had to pay off the loan, but my father-in-law's safety was more important than the money. After the renovation, for about the first month, my husband took the lead in providing care. But as time went on, he stopped taking care of his father because of his job. And by the time 1 year had passed since we started caring for my father-in-law, he stopped helping altogether. Even on his days off, he would just go out with his friends. My father-in-law's condition continued to deteriorate, and he needed help with the toilet and the bath. I couldn't continue providing care to him all by myself, so I talked to my husband about it. You said you would help too, but when was the last time you helped? How many months ago was that? There's a limit to what I can do as someone who's an amateur at this. I think we should have him admitted to a facility.
That's too cruel. We decided to take care of him at home, so we should see it through to the end.
If so, let's at least call for a caregiver. Your father was recognized for long-term care, so we can call one. I don't have the strength, and I would like to ask caregivers to help with things when it comes to, like, giving baths to him. My suggestion did not make my husband nod in agreement, but he left in the middle of the conversation to hang out with his friends. Again, I recently realized that my husband seems to be worried about money. However, it is difficult for me to continue providing care all on my own, so I arranged for home care services without my husband's consent. Because my father-in-law was certified for level 3 long-term care, a caregiver came to help about 5 times a week for about an hour each day. We created a plan within the limit of the long-term care insurance, so there was no financial issues. However, a problem occurred during the first home care visit. Hello, my name is Madison, a caregiver. Nice to meet you. Hello, likewise, nice to meet you. While talking with the caregiver about my father-in-law, I also learned about the caregiving methods. I felt that I had learned a lot and was glad that I had made the arrangements. But then, my husband came back from hanging out with his friends and angrily asked me,
Ella, I didn't approve of home care. What's going on?
I told you, didn't I? I can't do it all by myself.
I didn't approve it. Ma'am, please go home for today.
Despite being within the home care service hours, my husband didn't listen to my protests and sent the caregiver home.
Why did you arrange for home care without my permission? You're such a terrible wife to ignore me, who's the breadwinner of this family. If it's about caregiving, you should do it all by yourself. Don't waste money. On top of that, we spent money on renovations, didn't we?
Why don't you understand? I told you many times that I can't do it alone. Jake, you're not helping with the care, which is against our agreement. Moreover, the renovation was necessary. If your father had fallen and gotten injured, caregiving would have become more difficult. But you wouldn't understand because you haven't done any caregiving.
What are you talking about after 1 year of caregiving? And unlike me, you're not working. so it's natural that you should be providing care. Who do you think is paying for the renovation loan?
My husband won't understand no matter what I say, and he doesn't even listen to me. More than that, it seems that he believes that it's only natural that I should do it all by myself. From then on, I only had the caregiver for the home care come over when my husband was at work. I had relied a lot on the caregiver, not just for the caregiving, but also for the caregiver to listen to my husband's stories and for me to receive any caregiving advice. Then, after several months in this state, one day, my husband suddenly decided he would take over the caregiving.
You haven't been out properly in over a year, have you? How about getting a haircut and doing some shopping? I'll take care of it all today.
I gratefully accepted my husband's offer. I had my hair cut for the first time in a long while and spent the rest of the day at my favorite cafe enjoying some tea. I spent about 4 hours alone, but since my husband, who had hardly ever done caregiving, was now in charge, I decided to go home early as I was worried. When I returned home, it was very quiet and no sounds were heard in the house. I thought that my husband must be tired and sleeping because when I checked on my father-in-law, he was sleeping peacefully. But my husband was not in our bedroom. As I searched the house, I noticed an envelope on the dining table. When I opened the envelope, inside was a filled-out divorce paper and a letter. The letter said,
Let's divorce. Ella, even after the divorce, I hope you'll take care of my dad. I'm going on a trip for a week, so submit the divorce papers during that time.
I realized that Jake's unusual offer to do the caregiving was a ploy to get rid of me while preparing for his trip. It was sudden, and I was shocked that my husband had prepared the divorce papers. Moreover, it was appalling that he was still imposing the care of my father-in-law onto me even after our divorce. I had no idea what my husband was thinking. Thinking that I couldn't understand the meaning of this just from the letter, I called my husband. Jake, I saw the letter and the divorce papers. What do you mean by this? Who are you going on an overseas trip with?
Right now, I'm waiting to board the plane. Unlike you, I'm busy. It doesn't matter who I go on a trip with. We're getting divorced anyway. It's none of your business. Anyway, submit the divorce papers by the time I return from the trip. Goodbye.
Jake hung up the phone after saying that, without even trying to listen to what I had to say. Just before the phone cut off, I heard a woman's voice calling my husband's name. It seems that my husband is going on an overseas trip with a woman. Even though we've only been married for 3 years, could it be that he's been cheating on me? As I thought about my husband cheating and having fun while I was here at home taking care of my father-in-law, tears welled up in my eyes.
Ella.
As I was crying, I heard my father-in-law call out to me. Recently, it seemed he couldn't remember my name, so hearing him calling my name was a rare occurrence. I was worried whether my husband had genuinely taken care of him while I was out, so I decided to go to my father-in-law right away. Father-in-law, what's the matter? Were you okay while I was out?
Ah, Ella. Is the caregiver coming today?
My father-in-law seemed to get it together, which was pretty unusual. Is dementia something that you can be free from? No, they won't be coming today. They will come tomorrow morning.
I see. Could you bring me some paper and a pen then?
Despite my father-in-law's inability to write much anymore, he was doing a lot of unusual things today. I heard that writing can alleviate symptoms of dementia and can serve as a preventive measure, so I decided to let him do what he liked. As soon as I handed the paper and pen to my father-in-law, he began writing something. I couldn't see what he was writing. Once he finished writing, he put the papers into an envelope and handed it to me.
Please, give this to the caregiver tomorrow.
After saying that, my father-in-law fell back asleep. Could this be a result of his dementia training with Madison? I was curious about the contents, but decided not to look. Several hours later, when he woke up, my father-in-law seemed to have forgotten my name again, as if nothing had happened earlier. I wondered what exactly had happened and felt a sense of mystery. That night, After my father-in-law fell asleep, I rechecked the letter and divorce papers from my husband and pondered over them. Upon further thought, my husband's behavior seemed suspicious. I had been so preoccupied with caregiving that I hadn't paid much attention to my husband, which was probably why I hadn't noticed before. If my husband was having an affair, I wanted to get a divorce and move out as soon as possible, but I couldn't when I thought about my father-in-law. Also, since I had been a full-time housewife after starting to care for him, I didn't have significant savings, so money was another concern. I spent the rest of the day not knowing what to do. In the morning, Madison came over, and without much chit-chat, I handed her the letter my father-in-law had written, just as he had instructed me the previous day. When Madison read it, she looked deep in thought and began to speak to me. Although I came here as a caregiver, I consider you a friend, Ella. Cases like this happen quite often. I'll cooperate. By any chance, does the letter imply that I should divorce? Yes. It seems that Mr. John noticed that something was wrong with you and informed me. He's written asking me to help on his behalf. There are other things written, but we can go over those later. We don't have much time before your husband returns, so let's act now. Saying that, Madison called in another caregiver and asked her to look after my father-in-law. Let's go. With that, Madison took me outside. As I followed her, wondering where we were heading, we arrived at a law firm. Madison, why are we here? You'll understand once we get inside. Since she wouldn't give me more information, I followed Madison.
Thank you for coming today. We have received a request from Mr. John, and we will discuss it with you. First, he wants to make a living donation to you, Ella.
With that, the lawyer handed me some documents. The documents were notarized deeds, which my father-in-law had asked the lawyer to prepare through Madison in advance. The contents were about a living donation of $35,000, an apartment owned by my father-in-law to me. As I stood there unable to hide my surprise, Madison began to speak. He consulted me about this when I first visited for home care. He said he was grateful to you. However, since you're not adopted, you wouldn't inherit anything if something happened, so he wanted to give it to you in advance. I can't believe it. This is very generous. I need to thank my father-in-law immediately. Yes, you should. But before we go home, we have one more place to stop by. Again, I followed Madison, and after stopping by one more place, we went home. Back home, I thanked my father-in-law profusely. Even though he didn't seem to understand, I continued to thank him. 3 days later, my father-in-law passed away. He had developed complications due to the progression of dementia. I called my husband, who was on an overseas trip, but he probably thought it was about the divorce and didn't answer. So with no other option, I moved forward with the preparations along with the help from Madison. In the midst of relatives gathering, the relatives did not think well of my husband, who's the real son of my father-in-law, for not showing up. 2 days later, my husband, who had returned home without knowing anything, was immediately yelled at by all his relatives. Of course, I had also told the relatives about my husband's infidelity, so all the relatives were furious.
Hey, do something. I swear I wasn't cheating. I just went on a trip to change my mood because I was taking care of my dad every day.
You can't lie twice. You hardly took care of your own father. I know that you went on a trip with your mistress. The security camera at the airport captured you and your mistress like lovers. When I said that, my husband seemed to give up and silently listened to the words of anger from the relatives. A few days later, after things had settled down, I filed for divorce. From now on, I'm planning to move to the condominium that my father-in-law gave me while he was alive. As I was preparing for that, I received a phone call from my husband.
Ella, where are you? The beneficiary of my dad's life insurance isn't me. It's you. There's nothing left for me to inherit except for the life insurance, so what will you do about it? What did you tell my father when you were taking care of him? You were close with a visiting care worker, so you both must have planned this together.
It's my father-in-law's wish. The caretaker, Madison, was just acting in accordance with my father-in-law's wishes. Oh, yes. We're divorced now, and I think you and your mistress will be receiving a certified letter of contents from the lawyers soon. Make sure to pay the alimony.
What do you mean we're divorced? Alright, since you got my dad's life insurance, you should consider that as alimony, right? So I don't have to pay any alimony.
Jake seemed to have forgotten that he had left the completed divorce form for me before he went on his overseas trip. I was also surprised by Jake's outrageous way of thinking. The divorce form is what you left with a letter telling me to file it. And the life insurance is something precious that I received from my father-in-law. It's not something I got from you. You have to pay the alimony. When I said that, Jake seemed to have nothing to say and remained silent. So I had things to prepare and I hung up the phone after I said that. After that, I received several more calls, but I changed my phone number at Madison's suggestion. Even after my father-in-law was gone, I still meet up with Madison occasionally. Madison had acted more for my father-in-law's sake and for me than my real family, my husband. I'm really grateful to Madison. Later, it seems the certified letter of contents had reached my husband and his mistress, as I received a phone call from the mistress via her lawyer. I went on the trip because I heard from Jake that you two were divorced. Even though I was unaware of the circumstances, I apologized for going on a trip when Jake's father was in a difficult situation. I have already paid the alimony, and I will not see Jake again. This was her response. I was surprised, as I had assumed she was going to refuse to pay the alimony. I find it unbelievable that such a reasonable person would fall for my husband. On the other hand, it was decided that Jake would pay the alimony in installments. Apparently, Anna, his mistress, was wealthy, and it seemed that he had almost depleted his savings by trying to suit her lifestyle. Furthermore, I heard that Jake had paid for the trip in an attempt to impress Anna. I don't care if he runs out of savings. I intend to make him pay the full alimony, even if it takes time. His parents' house was under his father's name, so he should have no trouble finding a place to live. However, since there is a loan left from the renovation done for the care, the monthly payments along with the alimony will be quite substantial. Considering this will be deducted from Jake's salary, he should have barely any money left for himself, and this spread among his relatives, so he can't ask for their help. I hope he reflects well on his actions. As for me, I moved to the apartment that my father-in-law gave me as a gift before his death, and I am living a comfortable life. I am using the money I received from my father-in-law to study for a caregiver's license. Madison is helping me too. I don't just want to provide care, I want to become a caregiver who can support families like